WTF are boundaries? How do you set them? How do you communicate them? And how the heck do you enforce them? How do you even know what your boundaries should be? If only personal boundaries were as easy to see as a physical boundary, like a fence line. But what if I don't want a fence between me and the world? Is there a happy medium between putting up a wall between me and everybody and being a doormat and getting walked all over? Many have tried, but few have succeeded in making personal boundaries a simple concept. Let's see if we can learn how to honor ourselves today as we explore WTF boundaries are. All right, over to you, Tara. WTF are boundaries anyway?
I love that. Like, it's so true. I think that as we go into this world of boundaries, we do set up these fences and walls around ourselves and around our relationships. And we wonder why we feel so damned alone, why nobody's actually getting in and seeing us. But it's really hard to see through a fence, and I hazard a guess that most people's fences aren't the chain link ones anymore, right? Like those are too easy to climb. They're pretty solid and maybe even a wall. And so personally, how I work with people is on honoring. I completely use a different word because the definition of boundaries is really to create a line, limits, or rules to engage with. Well, I don't like those. Like those make me feel like I'm doing something wrong, even if my relationship is just with myself. And so every single word that we use has ramifications and energies that go out from it. So by just saying, how do you create relationships with yourself or with other people that are honoring? And that means that someone regards you highly. It means that there's an agreement that you've come to together and how you engage. And I'm like, oh, agreements work with me. That's communication. And that's you both feeling highly of each other and going in with the energy of you're not an asshole. Like I don't need to like put up all these rules and boundaries. And if somebody is a jerk in our lives, maybe just walk away. Maybe it's time to disengage. So,
Absolutely.
how about you?
Oh, I agree 100% with everything that you're saying. I don't like the idea of putting up a wall or a fence or a limit between myself and others. And I've also noticed that I need flexibility. I
Mm,
feel like different situations have different responses from me, and I don't want to spend my time, you know, deciding that, okay, I must be respected and it must look like this, and therefore it must, I must respond in this way. And so I've learned that boundaries for me are all about where I choose to put my
hmm
energy.
hmm
And so if you're being a jerk to me,
hmm
I can choose to put my energy into you and into this conflict, or I can choose to put it somewhere else. I can choose to put it into me. I can choose to disengage. So for me, it's all about moment to moment deciding where I'm going to put my energy. And the reason that I had this discovery about energy or the way that I see it, is because boundaries were explained to me like a bubble.
hmm
Right? I mean, I've taken so much training on this, and that's a very common word. It's like a bubble around you. And I was like, okay, I need to have a bubble. This is going to be great. I want this. And what I was finding was I was putting my energy to the bubble. I was putting all of it in there. So like if you were, rude to me or mean to me, I would put my energy into, no, I don't want you to, like, I'm not going to accept that. I'm not going to tolerate that. I don't want to be treated this way. And I would start thinking of solutions. Maybe I could, do this or that, and I was just very much putting my energy into my bubble. And what that did, it's like a superhero, putting up a shield. And at
hmm
the end of the superhero shield, so beautifully in so many movies, that superhero is depleted,
hmm
right? They've spent all of their energy putting up this shield. And I was finding myself frustrated, exhausted, lots of conflict, lots of guilt. And I needed a different way to do this.
hmm
And it occurred to me that everything is energy. And if I'm depleting myself this way, the whole point of boundaries is for me to maintain my energy and maintain my vitality. And so I learned a different way to do it. And you learned a different way to do it as well through honoring. So can you explain a little bit more how you, like what it means to honor your own boundaries? Not even like somebody else, but just your own.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to come back for a second just to that, like the depletion.
Mm.
One of the most powerful things that you and I have done here is asked ourselves the questions, is this working for me? Is this concept even working for me, or is it creating something else? And I would invite everybody who's listening, whether it's what we're sharing or somebody else or how they're living their life, is it actually creating the result that they're looking for?
Mm.
And if it's not, to start asking questions about how they can do life differently. And that's what you and I have both done. And that's why we bring these conversations to people, because it doesn't always work, right? So for me, to answer your question about honoring the boundaries with myself or honoring myself, it's taking the time to really ask what's getting created. I love your dog. It's good, right? It's like a great energy in the space. He's like, I'm exploring. I don't know where I want to lay down right now. I need to find somewhere that's really honoring of me and the experience I want.
There
So
you go. The power to choose.
exactly. So I think that's exactly what I've done is I've looked at when I run up against something that feels harsh to me, it might be something I'm choosing that feels harsh to me. I just pause and I ask some questions. And the questions are, do I want to continue to invest in this? Is it giving anything back? Do I feel honored? Do I feel regarded by myself or anyone else, or just the experience in itself? I mean, it could be not with someone, but the experience in itself, like, if I'm there's some workouts that I started, like what is I don't know if it's called Hard 75 or something. And I was like, this is not for me. This is not honoring. It doesn't regard me. It's great for somebody else, different personality style, different body, whatever. I need to do things that actually make me feel energized and loved and everything else, right? So the whole goal is the experience something that is kind to me, but also that creates for me? So those are my two questions.
Wow, that's so powerful. And that's very similar. You and I landed on a very similar spot with these boundaries because for me, all of your boundaries need to link back to who you are and what matters most to you. And
Mhm.
so I teach value-based, no BS boundaries. And so the first thing that you need to do is figure out what you actually care about, what actually matters to you. And we think, because we have programming, we think we know what we care about. Like, for example, just your example of workout, you think you know that, I care about me and my body, and so I'm going to work out, right? Great. But then you get into it and you realize this doesn't feel good to me. And you're stuck in this place where you've got two different values, which is actually what I talked about yesterday on my self-care Sunday. And
Mhm.
so you've got this one value of I care about me and I want to work out. And you've got this other value of I care about me and this doesn't feel good. I don't like this. I don't want to continue it. And then your old programming jumps in with, well, you have to continue it because you started it or because you're fat or whatever, like you have goals, whatever your mind BS is a jerk most of the time. And it's going to tell you all the things that it thinks is going to keep you on whatever path it wants you on. And so figuring out what actually matters to you, to me, and that's very similar to your honoring, is the very, very first step before you even think about setting a boundary. And so if you're like, oh, what actually matters to me is that I have patterns and I have workouts that feel good to my body,
Mhm.
then you can start making choices that are in alignment with that value instead of making choices that are aligned with your old programming, which is telling you you paid money for this, so you better use it. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, that whole committed thing that like I think that a lot of people feel so committed they've actually imprisoned themselves, right? Like it's kind of crazy. Instead of giving yourself that choice, there were those two things that you had there. Like, I definitely want to honor my body and go forward and do something different, but I also want to feel good. Why is that an either or? Why can't it be both? Right? Why can't we go, what would actually feel good? And how can that also come back and bless me? If I did pay money for something, maybe in the future, I need to slow myself down and ask the questions first. But also, how can I outcreate that money? Right? Like, how can I outcreate the money lost by still choosing to do something that's actually going to create the result that I want? Because when we're unhappy, it's doubtful that that body's going to change. We're just going to feel more and more awful. And then we're going to need other things to fix all the other things that are going wrong with our body because it's anxious and you feel depleted, you hate yourself for going there, whatever it is that we're layering upon by committing ourselves to something that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think you've alluded to that cycle there that we go to. We set a boundary. The boundary doesn't work for whatever reason. We decide that boundaries are BS and like they don't work and they're too much effort and I'm not getting what I needed anyway. And so we back off and we give up. Like if we have different behaviors for that. For me, I disengage. I'm not going to talk to this person. I'm not going to deal with this person. I'm not going to look at this person or this situation. And we all have different ways of dealing with it. But what I especially love is that when you get to that point where you are setting value aligned boundaries, where you are honoring your true self, what happens is that you start to be very confident in where you're putting your energy, right? And when you start being confident in that and confident in saying, you know what, I am living my values, I am living the life that I want to live, that guilt that always comes with boundaries, whether it's with yourself, like you're talking about the money loss, because, oh, I bought this workout plan and now I'm not following through. The guilt starts to go away and it starts to be replaced by like a celebration because you're like, you know what? I am honoring me. Heck yeah, that feels great. I am so proud of myself for taking steps into my best life. And that cycle that you were talking about, because you're now honoring, starts going away and the guilt goes away and the conflict goes away and the energy that you have been wasting, not even knowing it, worrying about these conflicting values, like you talked about anxiety, all of that stuff starts going away and you start feeling replenished and excited to tackle your day. It's such a huge snowball.
It is a snowball. I love that you brought that up. Like it's something when you start actually taking the time to ask the questions and really regard yourself, it almost feels more effortless. Like the more that you go into it, because people start to regard you more, right? Because you're not fighting for that person or that thing to make a difference. It's like, I'm going to stick with this no matter what. And even if I hate this moment or this interaction with this person is always toxic, you let go and then you go and you invest in the things that make you feel valuable, that bring value to you. So you're actually valuing yourself, but you're also doing this thing where you're evaluating, will this experience, this choice, this person choose to naturally bring value to this experience, right? And there's a difference to thinking somebody's valuable to them actually desiring to bring value or the experience. It's like, oh, I can think that hard 75 or whatever it's called is valuable. It absolutely is. I know a lot of people who get a lot of value out of it. But until I realize, like, does it bring value to me? Oh, well, no, it doesn't. It's like, if I'm going to make a fire, I'd rather have coal than diamonds, right? Like in that time, the more valuable thing when I'm freezing outside and I can't go anywhere is to have coal or wood or something like that. Diamonds are no good to me. It doesn't matter how much somebody says it's valuable. In that moment, the experience means I need something that fits that experience. So, yeah. What else are your thoughts?
Well, I thought that was so interesting because you've come to the same conclusion where it's about choosing where you put your energy. And you talked about, putting your energy into self-love and self-care and doing something that feels good to you. Absolutely. And it's interesting when you talk about the coal and the diamonds, right? Because you said other people tell me diamonds are more valuable.
Mhm.
That's the old programming. That's the
Mhm.
programming that tells you this path is the right path.
Mhm.
Pleasing people and helping people is the right path. That is the more valuable behavior for, maintaining relationships.
Mhm.
And it is really hard to break that. And so one of the tools that I teach, let's go into tools real quick,
Yeah.
is courageous communication. And what I find is that there's all sorts of different types of communication that people have. And one of the types that I encounter a lot is what I call cowering communication. I love alliteration. I just love it. Anyway, and so this is where you have to explain everything. Oh my goodness. Dog is going nuts. Okay. So this is where I just pulled my computer up. So, for example, I might say, "Oh, Tara, I'm not able to do the thing that you wanted me to do," and then I'm going to launch into a big long explanation about why. Why can't I do it, and how I really, it's not because of you, and I really want to help, and but I have all these things, and it's and that muddles everything, and that's a lot of energy, right? And if we're working on energy, we're going to start working on one sentence communication,
Mhm.
right? I'm not able to do that thing. I would love to do it with you another time. The end. And so that's an interesting tool. I always use also like a yes, but or a no, but.
Mhm.
So if you ask me to do something and I'm not able to do it, no, but I
Oh,
would love
yeah.
to do it with you another time. And that allows people to deviate from that yes or no. Like you talked about having like it's either yes or no, and
Mhm.
that's not true. You
Mhm.
can put your energy into anything. There's a million possibilities, but how do you figure them out? How do you help your people through that?
Well, I want to hang with yours for a second because I just love that, like that those are words that you shared, but it is the cowering energy. It's like this apologetic, um, you're waiting for somebody to attack you, right? And so that's why we're in that space of like cowering and then we defend and we're waiting for the attack. And when you changed it like that, you've completely removed the attack. It's, I'm not able to show up today, but I would love to do it another time, which also allows them to know, well, she's not out forever, right? Like this isn't like she doesn't ever want to do this and she's let me know that, so I'm never going to invite her again. Because I think a lot of times people give that whole cowering energy and then they never get invited again. And they're like, what happened? Well, you didn't say, I would love to be invited again, but today is really just not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, the biggest thing is I've kind of alluded through it is like really make sure that you're taking a pause whenever you're sharing, whenever you're going to choose something, ask whether it's going to be an experience that values you or brings value to your life. And then make sure that you express that with somebody. I know you were going into this experience of, also honoring ourselves and our no's, right? It's like there's times where it's not convenient for anyone, other people. Um, and I don't really have anything else to add to it than what you did, because I think that that is really the easiest response is to just let somebody know that it's not available to you at the moment. You can't do it at this time, or you won't be there, and to let them know that you'd love to have that happen again. And people tend to really honor that when you also are somebody who takes the time first, in most cases, to look at your schedule, make sure that your yeses are yes and your nos are no. That's the other piece, because if you're always somebody who's constantly saying no to somebody at the last minute, that's a cue for you to take a step back and look at, where am I saying yes to things that really are no's just because I want to please somebody. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a huge cue. And I would say like high five to the people who say no at the last minute, because they're at least realizing that it's a no. And like you said, to step back and figure out, oh, if I'm doing this over and over again, how can I shift my communication into a courageous communication in the first place?
Mhm.
And I love that you brought up the idea of cowering and it being a fight, like you're ready for a fight. And I think that is a something key that we need to talk about, because we think of boundaries as a fight,
Mhm.
right? We think the two most common communication styles I get are either that cowering communication where you're like, I don't want to fight, or I'm ready for a fight. And they go in there like, no, this is my boundary. And that's kind of almost what I was doing with my shield. I was like, no, 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 I'm putting all my energy. I'm like, oh, I'm not, and both of those are going to lead to a place where there's probably more conflict.
Mhm.
And that happens because you're approaching the situation as if it's going to be a conflict. Right.
Mhm.
And that's an energy exchange between us. But if you approach the situation like you're talking about from a place of thoughtfulness, you're now empowered, and not, and empowered doesn't mean fight, right? It
Right.
doesn't mean I've got my layers of metal on and my sword and my shield and I'm empowered to take this on. It means I get to choose. I'm empowered to love myself. And so you're empowered now to speak your truth. And
Mhm.
that changes the energy completely. People naturally appreciate authenticity and honesty. And if you're with a person who does not appreciate you showing up authentically, you've got a new choice to make, and you can choose where you want to put your energy in that relationship as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also think that energetically, so to be empowered, right, is in your power. So
Mm,
it changes everything. To me, there's light that comes from the core of us all the way up through our face and our eyes in that place, because you're like, this is what I need to do at this point, and I'm bringing that to you. I'm landing it there. I'm not asking you for your permission, right? We're
yeah.
not asking for permission. We're saying this is what's happening, and there are times where I may apologize. If I've inconvenienced somebody, I may apologize. And there's other times where I don't. So, like, you have to ask yourself what is correct in that moment. But we also tend to give other people permission to show up for themselves too when we don't apologize with our being, right? I'm not apologizing for my choice. I might be apologizing that this inconvenienced you, and that in the future I'm going to do it different, or not, because like life shows up. But that place of truly feeling in your power tends to please others too. So there's this weird thing, like we're going away from the programmed pleasing people that doesn't actually please them, and they're always insatiable, wanting more and more and more, and then like kind of stabbing us because it's not good enough, to this other place where we're coming from our fullness, truly honoring ourselves, and we end up overflowing that honoring, and we please them, and then they please us more. So it's like this really luscious, pleasing soup that doesn't feel fake. And and so that, like I always say to people, like if you get away from the programmed people pleasing and you move into truly honoring yourself, you will please more people than you think,
Yes.
and wait to see, right? So yeah.
I absolutely love the word permission that you just used. Permission to show up as your true self allows the other person permission to be open and authentic as well. And I would love to counter that and say that when you show up in the other energy, in the conflict energy, whether you're cowering or whether you're ready for a battle, you're giving them permission to show up in that exact same way where they're going to show up in a conflict. And if don't honor yourself and you um, let them walk all over you, you're giving permission for them to do that more. And
Mhm.
so, you talked about them wanting more, and it's like, I've given you permission to want more because I just keep giving you more. And
Mhm.
so that idea of permission, I think is really cool and not something that I have really explored. And so it's kind of exciting, all my nerdiness around this.
I love it, but I do like, I think I want people to hear what you just said again, that when you show up like ready for a fight or cowering, you're giving people permission to show up either the same as you or the opposite, right? Like sometimes when we're cowering, people show up with knives and
Yep.
they attack us more. But sometimes when we attack, like they claim victimhood, right? Like they're like, oh my gosh, you just destroyed my life, all these kinds of things. And you're like, oh my gosh, I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to defend my side here and let you know that this wasn't cool. And so that happy medium in the middle is what we've been talking about all the time here. It's really taking the time to ask yourself questions. I think you called something courageous. What was your
Courageous communication.
courageous communication? You have to actually know what you want to communicate,
Yes.
right? So, like, and to do it in such a way that invokes possible agreements or invokes clarity, because some people just never going to get to an agreement. You're never going to get to that place of regard or honoring, and that's okay. It gives you clarity to like choose differently, right? So, yeah, the power comes back to us when we stop asking for permission from everyone else.
Ooh, I was just going to ask you for any last thoughts, but I'm actually going to write that down.
There's my last thought.
The power comes back to us when we stop asking for permission.
Mhm.
Wow, that is beautiful.
Do you
Okay.
have last thoughts today?
Yes. And my last thought is you have the power to choose. In any given moment, you make your choice, and it doesn't have to be the same as the choice you made in the moment before. You
Mhm.
have the power to choose where you put your energy in any given moment. And if you link it to your values and what you actually care about, you'll be confident in knowing that where you put your energy is moving you consistently into your best life.
I love that.
Yeah, you're
Thank
so
you.
powerful today.
And you.
Wonderful, Tara. So where can people find you if they want to learn more?
Easiest place is taramccullum.com. All A's, no other vowel in there. Or you can go on YouTube and look up Tara McCullum too.
Awesome.
How about
And
you?
I'm Kristina Coder. You can find me at mindbs.ca. Did you have something else to say? Did I interrupt you? Sorry.
No, no, no.
Okay. Wonderful. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Next week, I think we're going to talk about work-life balance. WTF is work-life balance anyway. And we will see you then. See you. Bye. Ready to uplevel your boundary game? Discover your personal boundary style at mindbs.ca/boundary style.